Severe weather warnings across Queensland. Tropical cyclone risk developing for Western Australia. Flash flooding potential along the New South Wales coast. That is where we are heading into this weekend and the week ahead. Right now, conditions across northern Australia are about as uncomfortable as they get. Far North Queensland is sweltering. Mount Carbine hit 34 degrees by 10 this morning with 85% humidity. The overnight minimum barely dropped below 28 degrees. That is not sleeping weather. That is lying awake wondering why you live in the tropics weather. Central Queensland is copping it too. Hot, sticky and relentless. The humidity has been building for days now and there is no relief in sight for the next 48 hours at least. Down in southeast Queensland, Brisbane and the surrounding areas have been frustratingly dry. The dams need rain. Gardens are struggling. You have been watching storm after storm develop inland and then fizzle out before reaching the coast. That pattern continues today, but there are some changes coming that we need to talk about. Let me walk you through what the models are showing and what you can expect over the coming days, starting with the immediate threat. This afternoon and into this evening, thunderstorms are developing across northeastern New South Wales and the southern parts of southeast Queensland. The European model is being fairly bullish with this forecast, showing strong cells developing around the Lismore and Grafton areas from about 6 or 7 this evening. These storms have the potential to be significant. We are looking at moderate risks for large hail, heavy rainfall and damaging wind gusts. The environment is conducive. Humidity levels are through the roof. You can see it in the fog that developed across northeastern New South Wales this morning. That is a clear sign of just how much moisture is sitting in the atmosphere. The Bureau of Meteorology has issued severe thunderstorm warnings for the Northern Rivers region of New South Wales. If you are in the Lismore, Grafton, Casino or Ballina areas, you need to be paying attention this afternoon. Now, here is where it gets interesting from a meteorological perspective. We have a low pressure system developing offshore along the New South Wales central coast. You can actually see it on the satellite imagery. It is looking quite defined with a clear inflow tail being drawn into the centre of the system. This setup is remarkably similar to what we saw yesterday along the Victorian coast near Apollo Bay. That system produced 186 millimetres of rain in just 3 hours. Some of the worst flash flooding I have seen outside of the tropics anywhere in Australia. Cars were floating down streets. Properties were inundated within minutes. Victoria got lucky that the damage was not worse than it was. The concern now is that we have a similar pattern setting up along the New South Wales south coast and Illawarra region. When you get cloud tightly rotating around a low pressure system like this and thunderstorms get jammed up against the coastline, the rainfall can become extreme very quickly. Flash flooding does not give you much warning. 1 minute the road is clear, the next minute your car is underwater. If you are in the Wollongong, Kiama or Nowra areas, keep an eye on the radar this afternoon and evening. Have your emergency kit ready. Know your evacuation routes if you live in a flood-prone area. The SES message is simple and worth repeating. If it is flooded, forget it. Never drive through floodwater. You cannot tell how deep it is. You cannot tell if the road underneath has been washed away. Every year we lose people who thought they could make it through, moving into Saturday. The thunderstorm risk shifts slightly. We still have that low pressure system influencing the weather across the central New South Wales coast, and it is actually going to put the brakes on some of the storm development further north. There is a southeasterly change forecast to push through southeastern Queensland and northeastern New South Wales throughout Saturday afternoon and evening. Normally, a southeasterly trigger like this would have me quite concerned. These southeasterly changes are notorious for producing high-end severe thunderstorm activity when that cooler, moister air collides with the warm, humid air mass already in place. It can be the spark that sets off some serious storms. But there are a couple of caveats with Saturday's setup that suggest the threat is lower than it might otherwise be. First, the dry line is sitting very far inland. If you think back to the 1st of November last year and the severe thunderstorms that developed across southeast Queensland, we had a similar situation, the dry line being so far west means the storms struggle to organise properly. Second, for a southeasterly trigger to really get things going, we typically want to see wind gusts along the coastline between 30 to 40 knots in the afternoon. That is a strong sea breeze pushing inland. On Saturday, we are looking at maybe 10 to 15 knots. Barely a sea breeze at all, barely a trigger. So while the atmosphere is conducive for storms, without that trigger mechanism, they are going to struggle to get themselves off the ground. Expect some isolated activity, but nothing like what we saw in late October or early November last year. Sunday brings a different pattern again. The southeasterly flow picks up through the day, bringing scattered showers and the chance of embedded thunderstorms through southeast Queensland. Here is something worth understanding about these southeasterly events. The difference between a day that produces just showers and a day that produces showers with embedded thunderstorms and sometimes significant hail comes down to something called convective available potential energy, or CAPE. When we are talking about plain showers, CAPE numbers sit around 0 to 500. When we start seeing embedded thunderstorms and the chance of small hail, those numbers jump to between 500 and 1500. Sunday looks like a 500 to 1500 type day. That means there will be the risk of some heavier downpours and potentially some small hailstones through southeast Queensland. Nothing larger than about 1.5 to 2 centimetres. Think more like a bag of frozen peas dropping on you rather than the golf ball sized hail we have seen too often in recent years. For those of you hoping for decent rain across southeast Queensland, I know you have been waiting. Brisbane has been frustratingly dry this summer. The Lockyer Valley has been weird, as one local described it. Cool breezes followed by warm, sticky, humid ones, then cool again. The weather has been all over the shop. Unfortunately, this weekend is not going to deliver the widespread soaking rain the region needs. Isolated storms, yes. Brief, heavy falls in some areas, yes. But not the kind of general rain event that fills the catchments. That brings me to the more significant weather systems developing across northern Australia. The monsoon is well and truly active now. Darwin copped steady rain from 6 this morning, and it does not look like slowing down. That monsoonal trough is strengthening, and it is going to have major implications for several parts of the country over the next 7 to 10 days. Let us start with what is happening in the Gulf of Carpentaria and the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf. We have a tropical low designated 16U that is expected to develop over the Darwin area and then track out towards the Indian Ocean. This system is one to watch for Western Australia, and I need to be very clear about the potential severity here. The environment this system is moving into is extremely favourable for intensification. Minimal wind shear, maximum humidity, warm sea surface temperatures. This is the fuel a tropical system needs to strengthen rapidly. Once this low moves out into the Indian Ocean, the models are showing significant intensification potential. We are talking about the possibility of a major tropical cyclone developing and tracking towards the Western Australian coastline somewhere between late January and early February. Now, normally at this time of year, we see systems dragged in towards the Kimberley coast prematurely because the jet stream is still positioned quite far north. But we are getting into late January now, and that jet stream is starting to sink further south. That opens up tracks towards the Pilbara or even the Gascoyne coast, which is more typical of February or March systems. The models are showing this potential cyclone tracking towards the Port Hedland area. Some runs are showing Category 4 at landfall. Some are even suggesting Category 5 potential. I want to be careful here because the system has not even developed yet. We cannot call landfall location, timing or intensity with any confidence at this stage. But for anyone living between Coolum Point in the north down to Exmouth in the south, you need to be paying very close attention to the forecasts over the coming days. That includes Broome, Derby, Port Hedland, Karratha, Onslow and Exmouth, potentially even Wyndham as well. If this system does intensify to Category 3 or stronger, we are talking about a very significant tropical cyclone landfall somewhere along the WA coastline. Based on current model guidance, I would put the chance of a Category 2 or stronger cyclone affecting the WA coast in the next week and a half at greater than 50%. That is not a number I throw around lightly. For those in the potential impact zone, now is the time to start your preparations. Check your cyclone kit. Know where your nearest cyclone shelter is located. Make sure you have enough water, non-perishable food and any medications you need for at least 3 days. Secure loose items around your property. If you live in a caravan or temporary structure, start thinking about where you would relocate to if a cyclone warning is issued. The Bureau of Meteorology will be issuing updates as this system develops. I strongly encourage you to check their website daily and sign up for warning alerts if you have not already. Now let me turn to what is developing closer to Queensland. Out in the Coral Sea, we have tropical low 14U tracking towards Vanuatu. This system is expected to intensify into a tropical cyclone as it approaches New Caledonia before recurving back down towards Norfolk Island and New Zealand in the middle of next week. The good news for Queensland is that this system is not expected to approach the Australian coast. Its closest approach will keep it well away from the mainland. No impacts expected for Queensland from this particular system. However, there is another area of concern developing that directly affects far north Queensland. With tropical low 16U expected to move west towards the Indian Ocean, that leaves the area over the Gulf of Carpentaria and Coral Sea open for the development of a separate tropical low or tropical cyclone. The models are struggling to get a handle on exactly what is going to happen here. There is virtually no consistency between the major forecast models right now. The European model shows one scenario, the GFS shows something completely different, and the Access model is somewhere in between. What I can tell you is that chances are increasing for a tropical low to develop off the Cape York Peninsula around the 20th of January. I would put that probability at around 20 to 25% at this stage. If this does occur, we are looking at a period of wet weather increasing from Monday and Tuesday next week, really picking up between Thursday and Friday, the 22nd and 23rd of January, before potentially easing back next weekend as the system crosses the coastline and weakens inland. For far north Queensland, the Cape York Peninsula and areas along the Gulf coastline, scattered heavy rainfall accumulations between 100 and 400 millimetres are possible over the next 7 to 10 days. That is significant. That is the kind of rainfall that causes flooding, closes roads and isolates communities. If you are in Cairns, Cooktown, Waipa or anywhere along the Cape, make sure you have supplies to last a few days in case roads become impassable. I know there was a question about moving house up in the Daintree area on Monday or Tuesday next week. Based on what the models are showing, there is certainly a risk of increased rainfall and potentially flooding crossings from Monday onwards. If the crossings are low now, they may not stay that way. Keep a very close eye on conditions and have a backup plan ready. It might be worth calling ahead to check road conditions before you set out. For those in Townsville, you have already seen some flash flooding come through randomly in recent days. That kind of hit and miss activity is likely to continue as the monsoon remains active. Let me touch briefly on the rest of the country before we wrap up. Southern Australia is in a completely different weather pattern. Tasmania saw -2 degrees this morning with frost across many areas. That cold air mass over the southern states is in stark contrast to what is happening up north. Melbourne had some relief from the heat after the storms moved through, but the south coast of Victoria is still dealing with the aftermath of that significant flash flooding event. Clean-up efforts are underway around Apollo Bay and the Great Ocean Road. Adelaide has been relatively pleasant, not too hot, not too cold, enjoying a brief respite before the next change comes through. Perth and Western Australia have been dry, but need to be preparing for what could be a significant weather event in the coming week to 10 days. Looking at the models out to the end of January, we are in an active phase of the monsoon. La Nina continues to influence the weather patterns across Australia, favouring increased rainfall across the northern half of the country and tropical cyclone development. For those asking about the wet season in southeast Queensland, it has been disappointing so far. The monsoon moisture has been staying further north than we would like. There is some potential for that to change as we move into February, but I am not going to promise anything until the models show more consistency. A few points of practical advice before I finish up. First, check on your elderly neighbours and mates, particularly those in the north dealing with extreme heat and humidity. Heat stroke is a serious risk when overnight temperatures stay above 25 degrees. Make sure vulnerable people have access to cool spaces and plenty of water. Second, if you are in a flood-prone area anywhere along the eastern seaboard, make sure your emergency kit is ready. Torch, batteries, first aid kit, important documents in a waterproof container, enough water and food for 3 days. Third, for those in Western Australia, start your cyclone preparations now. Do not wait until a warning is issued. Check your roof for loose tiles or sheets. Clear your gutters. Trim any overhanging branches near your home. Know where your nearest cyclone shelter is. Fourth, the humidity across Queensland is not going anywhere for a while. If you are dealing with wet floors from condensation on tiles, you are not alone. Keep air circulating, run the air conditioning periodically if you have it, and accept that this is part of living through a La Nina wet season. That is where we stand as of Friday, the 16th of January, 2026. Severe thunderstorm risk this afternoon and evening for northeastern New South Wales and the New South Wales south coast. Flash flooding potential around the Illawarra. Isolated storms for southeast Queensland, but nothing major. Active monsoon across northern Australia with heavy rainfall developing, and 2 potential tropical cyclone situations that need close monitoring. One heading towards Western Australia with significant intensity potential, and one that may develop off the Queensland coast next week. Stay across the Bureau of Meteorology warnings. Prepare for what is coming. And I will have another update tomorrow morning with the latest model guidance.